Awarded since 2004, the Templeton Freedom Award is named for the late investor and philanthropist Sir John Templeton. The award annually honors his legacy by identifying and recognizing the most exceptional and innovative contributions to the understanding of free enterprise and the public policies that encourage prosperity, innovation, and human fulfillment via free competition. The winning organization receives a $100,000 prize, and the runners-up each receive $25,000. The award is generously supported by Templeton Religion Trust and is presented during Atlas Network's Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner in New York City. The winner of the 2017 Templeton Freedom Award is IMCO, Instituto Mexicano para la Competitividad. For the first time in the history of modern Mexican democracy, a credible and effective anti-corruption legal infrastructure now exists. Mexican politicians face real tests of accountability thanks to Instituto Mexicano para la Competitividad, or IMCO's revolutionary 3 for 3 campaign. As of July 2017, the law requires every politician to publish his or her declarations of assets, taxes paid, and possible conflicts of interest. This comes as the result of an intensive 2-year campaign, launched and led by IMCO, in which they raised more than 630,000 signatures, 5 times the number required to introduce the 3 de 3, or 3 for 3 framework, to the Mexican Congress for passage into law. 7 laws drafted by IMCO were passed within 6 months, creating the national anti-corruption system. IMCO's 3 for 3 campaign fights corruption and gives Mexicans hope for the future.
Okay. I hope you were able to listen to that short video. Any quick takeaway from this video?
Managed to get a lot done in a short period with a very large number of signatures.
That's right. Yeah. So very successful campaign on an important, very important issue of fighting corruption. Right. And so I think what many of our think tanks often struggle is to find such similar successful and effective campaigns. Right. So when we talk about research reports, when we talk about media engagements, when we talk about briefings, etc., we are normally quite effective. But reaching out to a large number of stakeholders, reaching out to actually making sure that we get to the results through this effective campaigning is not always easy. And such examples are not very often, but maybe we can discuss these advocacy examples in this session. So what I'm going to do right now is, this session and the next session, is to talk more on advocacy and the role of think tanks in advocacy. And then we'll talk about developing advocacy agenda, and in the end we'll have a small exercise in which we'll divide ourselves into maybe 2 groups when we will actually develop an advocacy agenda. We'll see how to use some of these examples we have learned. Right? So first of all, we'd like to define advocacy. What do we mean by the word advocacy? So essentially, it's about moving a target audience to a particular goal or particular position which an organization or think tank has defined for itself. It can be a particular policy, it can be an opinion, it can be to stop introduction of a new policy, it can be launching of a policy, it can have different purposes, but essentially we're talking, and then it may or may not be backed up by research. So we'll talk about research and advocacy in a moment, but what is important to understand that this is driven to change something. And that essentially, I think, distinguishes the work which is mostly done by research institutions, academic institutions. What differentiates this work from think tank is that think tank are normally driven for that, for change of a policy choice or change of a public opinion, in which maybe the researchers and academics may not be driven by that. They are mostly driven by generation of knowledge or contribution in the knowledge. So the example which we just saw from Mexico was a good example of how a local group mobilized vast public support to encourage the parliament to introduce anti-corruption laws, and then those laws were adopted eventually. Have you been, as a part of your think tank, been involved in advocacy, or like, because there's a mix of representation here, some people are involved in more research side, some people are more involved in advocacy side. Have you actually led an advocacy or been involved part of an advocacy campaign? You have been?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Can you example of the advocacy campaign you were part of?
Yeah. We did public and also internal advocacy. It means that what we have done has been conducted for limited limited audience. For example, what has been done by the Paramadina Public Policy Institute is try to give guidance for corruption eradication commissions, new chairman. This special anti-graft agency has for about 5 commissioners in Indonesia. KBK, yes, that's right, KBK, and unfortunately, especially for the new elected or new selected commissioners, because they're new people. In many cases, they got problematic communications within their board. Within their chairman's board, and because of that, and then we conducted internal survey to accommodate internal perspective on what should KPK do for the next leadership, and then we conducted some research survey and also interviewed some stakeholders within the KPK, and then after that we tried to communicate and also did advocacy about what we have collected, the data information, and then to explain to everyone, especially between new leadership and then prosecution officer and also investigator officer, because they coming from different sections, from police office, from attorney general office, and also to some extent from anti-corruption activists, which have various or different background with different level of anti-corruption commitment, with a different level of integrity. So we try to do that to streamline their internal communication, to build more effective anti-corruption machine within the KPK. So that's what we have done. In terms of the public advocacy, just a couple of weeks ago, I and also Septa went to Papua, which is really close to Papua New Guinea. I went there to fly there. Yes, as we know that after the newly democratized era in Indonesia, we conducted decentralization policy. Unfortunately, decentralization which we expected to empower local government, but the problem is so very complex. There are some local government, cities or regions or provinces, they can accelerate their local economic capacity, but on the other hand, there are some or many local government that cannot do anything, just expecting for the central state budget. And because of that, and then we try to conduct research based on the local government that was in Sorong, South Sorong. So we fly from Jakarta to Sorong, and South Sorong is for about 4 hours driving. So we come into the jungle, and that's really jungle, literally jungle, not jungle like in city or somewhere. So we went there, and then we meet the region, and then the vice region, and also all stakeholders within the government. And then we try to explain the detailed matters. What should they do to increase their local income and to reduce their dependency on the central government budget? So how to encourage their local capacity? That was good, even though to some extent, as I already mentioned in the previous one, they have different capacities. Especially our colleague in Papua, if we talk about human capacity, yes, there is serious issue in there. So that's why we try to ensure them, but in the same time we also try to provide more clearer guidance. What next step? What next step? So that's why by making sure the next step, we can try the best advocacy for them, even though to some extent we also a bit a priori to the result, but at least we try to do our best for this one.
Great, thank you. So I think the when we talk about public advocacy, I mean, of course, you have mentioned about the examples where the sort of community mobilization. I think I would take your example as two maybe aspects. One is the community mobilization, and second is the capacity building.
Sure.
Right. So this is certainly a part of the spectrum of the work which think tanks involved. But when we talk about public advocacy, I think mobilization would become a part of it. Mobilization may not be the end result of it. Okay, so when we mobilize a community, when we go to them, when we talk to them, obviously we are advocating for a certain point. But then at the end of the day, what we want them to believe? Do we want to change a position which the community believes? That is, I think, very difficult thing to achieve in terms of when we talk about grassroots communities. So in this case, in the case of, let's say, the policy think tanks, what we are concerned is more, I would say, modest targets, modest objectives behind it. I've tried to simplify it. For instance, in let's say either introducing or stopping a policy or part of the policy. So when we talk about role of policy think tanks in the advocacy spectrum, most of the time it will fall into these categories. Either you are trying to introduce a new law. In the video there was an example from a Mexican think tank which were advocating the introduction of new anti-corruption laws, or it can be sometimes stopping a new policy. for instance, in the case of market economy oriented think tanks, if they see the government is introducing some level of price control or government is nationalizing some industries, they would come forward to stop that. So that is the role, that is the advocacy role of the think tanks, which is expected from them. It can also be not just a whole policy, but also a change in the policy, which the think tanks are often involved in. So when I say role of think tanks in advocacy, I think I would like us to focus on these examples. How can think tanks play a role in introduction or in stopping the laws according to those own worldview or the vision where think tanks is operating from? Any comments or thoughts so far on this? Yes, please.
I think this is related to what we are doing.
Can you give it? Yes.
Yeah, the introducing new policy or try to inject to change some part of the policy during the process of policy making is part of our work. But I think for us in Cambodia, we have no capacity like that to stop any law amendment, but we can we try to inject our concept or the concern from the research-based finding or from the needs or the concern, the real issue at the ground level. But I don't think we can stop any law or policy making, but we can try to shape the objective of the policy in some part.
Can you give the example of the first where your think tank tried to introduce some policy?
One practical experience is about the land management policy.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a research project and we want to let me say maybe lobby, not advocate, the ministry to have some part in their land management policy to work with like smallholder farmers, the potential one that have the capacity on capital to do we call it the commercial farming or business farming. Because in Cambodia we have the economic land concession, which the government allocate like about 10,000 hectares to any local or foreign investors. But for the project, we try to lobby the government to look at the potential, work with the potential farmers, like allocate land, like farming land around 10 to 30 hectares to the potential farmers with a medium-term contract around maybe 20 to 30 years. So they will be able to generate income, engage in the commercial farming, while also contribute to the job creation and livelihood development, which like from our research finding it's more potential and more beneficial than some large-scale land investment that just cut down the trees.
Okay. Now, this is a very good example. I think this is a very specific example of what we normally would understand from policy advocacy in this case, and so normally we will involve with in terms of research and our campaigns according to particular goals of such policy, right? So now if you broaden your horizon, of course think tanks do not operate in isolation, right? This is not working fine. Okay. Think tanks operate in, I would say, in an overlapping space of ideas. So we have, of course, academia, we have business associations, political parties, government, and civil society organizations in there. And for a successful campaign, you also have to align yourself with these broader directions in terms of, let's say, if they are, what is the overall direction of the political party? How does the bureaucracy feels about a particular policy? In this case, as you mentioned, about the land management. Are there interested groups and individuals within the CSOs which are already working in that area? Are there business associations which are active? We were mentioning about earlier, talking about the stakeholders. So here it is important to understand where the sort of common points can be drawn, can be sort of crystallized from these various stakeholders. And this space and this analysis can help us also generating some kind of consensus. When we are talking about think tanks, we are often, in terms of advocacy, we want to change existing positions, we want to change existing opinions. So therefore, for us it is important to analyze for any given issue where does main stakeholders stand, and what kind of common agreements we can draw as think tanks. Just to give you an example from ideas, and I'm sure this is not a unique example, I'm sure that many of your institutions have been involved in similar exercises, but I can say that one of the sort of more appreciated features of think tank is a convening space. So think tank is not representing business association, think tank is not representing a political party or a university or government itself, but then it sits somewhere in the middle. That place may be very small, but the think tanks have the ability to bring people from the academia, from the politics together, and that provides some kind of leverage to think tanks, and also provides some kind of degree of confidence about to the people in how think tanks can drive the agenda. Of course, think tanks are not without their own agenda. Think tanks do have their own policy agenda, as we discussed in the start. We discussed about their views, their ideologies. But the success of think tanks, a large part of the success lies in their ability to convene these discussions. And if a think tank is not able to bring in representations from these various diverse sectors, then the ability to advocate a position or change any particular law gets weakened.
You might add the media as one of the other circles in that.
I thought actually I thought about the media. I agree with you. But I also think that media also is like medium. So I was thinking whether the media itself is the power or media is conduit of power for, let's say, political parties or government or private sector. And so I think I'm very open to it. But I think in many cases media itself is representing is a conduit of power of many of these stakeholders. But certainly we need to agree. We need media as a platform for these discussions. Now here we come back to the challenges which we face in the advocacy. So remember, before the lunch we were talking about the positioning, the worldview, and how this worldview can be an obstacle. At the same time, it can be a helpful factor for propagating your position. So I'm happy to discuss. Of course, we can add on to the list of these challenges. But some of these challenges to me are, it starts from, okay, what is the bias? If, let's say, if you're taking a particular position and that is conceived by others, the other stakeholders I mentioned about the government or political parties, as too ideologically biased or too much sort of partisan, then the advocacy position of think tank is weakened. Also, if the funders' influence is more, and if it is seen as more of a donors-driven agenda, then it's also a problem for a think tank to establish credibility, in the advocacy campaign. We have examples where media has reported like news, oh, this is coming from a particular foundation, particular NGO or a donor, and then even a good message can be diluted. Many people, especially in the academics, would like to also challenge some of the research which think tanks are doing. I mean, the capacity of think tanks to do research varies greatly. Some of the think tanks are able to produce high quality research. Then they have their own reports and publications such as these, PEPR, very sort of wide-ranging topics and in-depth reports, but not every think tank has the capacity to do it. And so therefore, if the campaign is based on some kind of evidence, some survey, it is often can be put to the question, so we need to be very careful about how to manage this kind of expectation. Also the political interests, and if there is only, like say, one party representation in the think tank, then again the advocacy position can be challenged. And we talked about the project life cycle, and this is quite typical. So in 1 year we are talking about issue of decentralization, right, and corruption. So in that 1 year when it is funded, the think tank is talking about that issue all day online, in media, in seminars, in the government. But then due to this, I think, constraint in the business model, next year we may not be talking about that. So again, when we are doing these campaigns, we are doing these advocacy campaigns, we cannot 100% control the results, and sometimes the results come after the project life cycle is over, and there is no way we can control it. And if a think tank has let's say given up on the particular project idea, and if there is interest later on, then that opportunity is lost. So therefore it is important to have a commitment in the think tank itself at some level, that even if the project is finished, there is an interest, there is some level of commitment, even if not full resource allocation, but some level of commitment to the goals which were associated with advocacy. So we'll move on to the next presentation, which is related with the advocacy and which is more related on the advocacy, developing advocacy agenda. But on these points, if you have any general questions and thoughts, we can take them now. Advocacy and
well, I mean, obviously we're all in the room together, and there is a useful role in collaborative work in particular areas. We partner with some others in the region on issues like the EITI process and the Open Government Partnership process, and we have partners in several other countries, certainly with Anti-Kita and a team over in Philippines and others. And these and then we sort of do a little bit of taking it in turns to represent each other in regionally. So we're meant to be sort of with Indonesia and Philippines, sort of taking it in turns to sort of try and promote someone who'd be in on an international advocacy arrangement. These are quite useful.
international coalitions and regional
coalitions that sort of reinforce each other, also on domestic, but obviously are empowered by activities that are happening back home each.
It's a very good example of making use the available resources and also in increasing the influence of your advocacy agenda. And if in many cases we are interested in learning what other countries are doing. And in this case, I agree with you that if you can bring these examples from other countries, it certainly helps. Some years ago, when I was doing this work with Prime, which was also SIPE supported project on the manifesto tracking project, the scorecard. This was taken up by other countries also, Nepal and Sri Lanka. And it was used as an example of what can be done in other countries if this has been done in one country. So certainly building up of coalition and using those examples can be helpful way of improving advocacy.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, one example, we participate in this, the Open Budget Index, Open Budget Survey every 2 years. And we're doing it at national level, and we are doing certain things at a domestic, subnational level. But I have to say that, in Vietnam, there's a group that's doing it at national level, but they've done it also for all the provinces of Vietnam. And wow, going through all the criteria and looking at all the standards and performance within Indonesia and within Vietnam, and I was thinking of that in the context also of Indonesia. A lot of lessons that we can learn from each other, from some of these efforts. I'd have to go and double check on the...
Any other questions and thoughts on the advocacy roles in general?
Using the same model that IBS.
What challenges have you faced in let's say in your advocacy campaign? Can you give an example? If you can say face any challenges.
The biggest challenge, I think, as you mentioned before, we can't control the result because, our target audience is the policymaker. So sometimes it's not easy to change the role of the policy because many other factors come together, impact and influence the process of making laws. And when we try our best, and via media, via the public opinion, to let them know about our recommendations or findings, but we're not 100% sure about whether they adopt or accept or employ our methodology or not.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think it's a very good point. And at which stage do we say that let's this is a success and this is not a success? In most of the cases, it can be said that if a think tank has articulated a position clearly and has reached out to the target audience in terms of whether it is the government or it is the political party. I mean, mostly, of course, when talking about policy making think tanks, we are thinking about the government essentially. Yeah. In terms of media, yes, we can talk about articulation of that position, and obviously we are not saying that each campaign can be effective.
Yes.
But we are saying that what it takes to make it more effective are these some of these factors.
Yes.
You,
we're not sure about the result.
Yeah.
The final result.
Yeah.
That can be shown in laws or regulations.
True.
So in paper, that we can reach to our target audience. For example, some members of Parliament of National Assembly and policymakers, because we directly contact them and send the report to them. And in Vietnam, actually, reports made by VPR are so weighted by them.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's effectiveness. That's the outreach.
Yes.
I think one of the challenges is when the public are not what we call it is not agree with the advocacy itself. For instance, like the case of TPPA in Malaysia, okay, and ideas pro to the TPPA, or of course I lead also pro to TPPA, but the people, most of the people during that time against the policy, the TPPA, okay. So how we want to control our reportation, our report in terms of, because we are promoting and advocacy, this kind of thing, make some kind of pro to the governments during that time, and at the same time it seems like against the people. So we need to think how we want to deal with this kind of situations, right?
So you are absolutely right. When we talk about these campaigns, there is a risk of making some part of the population not so happy about it. But that's the risk which a policy think tank is often taking, based on its own understanding, based on the research which has conducted. If it has taken a position, let's say in this case that the Malaysian government should ratify the CPTPP, then it takes that position at that risk. But essentially, what we are saying is that the success of that campaign would not be measured by, in this case, whether the public is happy or not. The success would be measured by whether the government has taken a position for it or not. And let's say when Ideas was engaging in outreach campaign, business associations, media, smaller groups, and their response to it also influenced the government position to it, right? So I think we all played a role in that. That's what I mentioned in the earlier slide. The think tanks have a small role in the bigger community of the stakeholders, and whether we can convene effectively influences heavily the advocacy effective success.
Can I?
Yes.
I heard a few colleagues talk that they can go to the parliamentarian when they want to advocate something.
So say again?
I have heard a few colleagues talking about like when they want to advocate for some policy or you can go directly to the parliamentarian.
Not us physically go to the house, party house, but our report, our paper was sent to them, to the members of National Assembly. Yes, as the materials of reference.
I think she said that their reports are awaited. So they wait for your reports to come out and they look forward to your reports.
For example, this one. See, this one is one of our So quarterly report, and each time we launch this report, we send to them. In other papers and other books too.
So this is a part of your general educational and in research. And in this report, you are not taking a particular policy position, but you are just improving the level of access and information. Right?
I have a question. Actually, it's a good point that you raised. Whether directly or indirectly, you're trying to create these products or services that are relevant to the policymakers. And my question would be for the group is there a conscious effort being done by your respective think tanks in trying to produce products that are relevant to be accessed by your policymakers? Either you would like to directly influence the way they respond to issues or look at the issues, or indirectly make use, indirectly somehow for you to be a resource but make use of the relevant materials that you use. in that way, that indirectly influence is already there, their take on particular issues. I'm curious about these things because the dynamics in our countries are different in as far as how policy interaction and how responsive some policymakers are. So I'm curious in as far as whether this is something that we are conscious with in as far as the position as well we take on the role of our think tanks and on making relevance in policy issues and policy discussions.
Any responses to Ryan's questions about whether think tanks have those products or those publications as an outreach instrument for the policymakers?
I'd like to add as well, I mean, in the discussion, I mean, I've seen very good research materials but in as far as creating that traction in a policy space, making it relevant, is it something that we are consciously aware or trying to consciously make it useful? One is highlighting all these quantitative variables, but at the same time making it useful and digestible to make it useful for a policy discussion or even a policy note in that level. I'm curious about how think tanks perceive this kind of either positioning but also making use of their vantage point in producing these kinds of products.
Please.
So in our network, sometimes we could see that the research is really takes and long. So many government officials was really bored and not really read all of them. So sometimes we are issues like infographic or small little left thought, and we put it on the National Assembly library so they could easy to access or send directly to them to their mailbox. So it's small and condensed information and really easy to look at. So we will send them this little letter. So yeah, exactly, kind of small like that, so they could easy to look. Another ways is for example, we chose like key member from the National Assembly. For example, we have personal contact with some of them, so we could directly contact with them and maybe ask them to send the information to the other key member as well and influence.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I mean, I'll give you one example, maybe on Ryan's question. We had a very thick report, which is this manifesto tracking report, which IDS publish every 6 months. And obviously we know that not many MPs, not most of the MPs are going to read. This is this thick. Right. Oh. Right, so this was the report. But then we also know that we need to have another sort of mini version of the same report containing useful statistics, some graphics, some numbers like this. And we printed it in a bigger number. So eventually it was easy for us to reach out to a greater number of people, but this became more of a research material and is of course media uses it in the report. It has been used in articles following the report. So, but we need to make sure that we are using the right product to reach out to the audience. I think that is a very important point which I made.
To this point, we could share experience too. So it might depend on culture, on the habit too. In Vietnam, we send so the member of stamping like this size paper rather than the smaller size, because it's with this one we print in big letters. Yeah, so they are quite old. Sorry. And so the size, okay, so limited. So
it can vary from
this, not the other size. Yeah, so this one is English, and for our like partners, for reading partners, but for member partners is this size. Yeah, and here.
You have about 20 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just wanted to share my experience with members of parliament, because I have a experience working with Parliamentary Institute of Cambodia when I did my fellowship, at Cambodia. So I joined with the program, and then I worked with the members of parliament in Cambodia, and I'm working for the past 7 years, 8 years in Malaysian parliament. So yeah, I agree with the experience from with all of you with regards of the members of parliament. They don't like to read. Overall, they don't like to read. So you have to give them like very infographic, very simple, and then if they asking further information, then you give the thick one, the details one. So another thing is that the approach that you can do is that asking from the which political party, from the opposition or the government, or request from the members of parliament organization to host a program that you can present your products.
Yeah.
Means that because of you are very objective, you are very transparent in terms of your research. So when you present it, you don't present. Yeah, of course. I believe there is a situation where you need to present in backbenches only, government backbenches only, and also for oppositions only. But of course, for overall, you can present it to both political parties or both blocs, with government and also opposition. I think in terms of Malaysian parliament right now, we are really open to allowing research institute or think tank to present their cases or their research for the oppositions and also for the government.
Yeah, that I certainly agree with you. I mean, the Speaker of the lower house has even instituted lectures from civil society who would come to the parliament, and they would speak to the members of the parliament on right. So, okay, we have a couple of more interventions here, but we'll come back to you, please.
I think it's maybe because of the cultural factors or social factors, but in the case of Cambodia, I don't think that it will be influential advocacy strategy. Even we print in A4 paper with big letter, and if we go to the wrong channel, nobody gonna read it. So for us, we have to, if we work on land policy or economic policy, we have to go to the key person at the ministry to bring the message for us to the parliament. If you just have a paper or a key message in the paper and you go directly to the parliament, nobody gonna read.
Yeah.
I'm sure, maybe 90%.
And there's also a question of timing. So
Yes, sure.
when you have it after a new election and you get new members of parliament, that's the time that they may actually be readier to listen and learn. Obviously, key people like a cooperative speaker. Some speakers are most uncooperative, but if you've got a cooperative speaker, then develop that channel. We actually, it was actually TIPNG helped set up a parliamentary website in Papua New Guinea, which enabled the speaker to promote what he's doing in parliament and to flag what the members of parliament, give some information about them, but also to upload a lot of material on there. So that was quite a useful role for. But yeah, as time goes by and they get more entrenched, they often are less open to listening.
Yeah. Okay, we have a couple of more quick interventions, please.
Okay, I totally agree with you and with her too. Yeah, both, because to make a campaign successful, we need different channels of advertising. Yes, and talking to public.
Yeah.
Yes, find our intention. So sending the reports to the members of assembly is only one way. And exactly like you, now we are proceeding a research on land on the amendment of land law in Vietnam, and now we follow the assembly meeting calendar, and to plan our steps for campaign. And we also have to access people, key persons in ministry, yeah, to put our idea in the draft before it is submitted to the House. Yeah, so we have to employ different channels of media, and so 10 years we see that influencing by through media is very important channel. Even if you want the policy makers and the members of assembly read it, we can't rely on their willingness, but on the pressure of the public, of the media to read it. Yes.
That's an important point. Yeah. Let me move on to a related topic from here. Actually, a lot have been said already on the tools of advocacy, but we'll come back on the tools of advocacy actually in our last session tomorrow, in which we will discuss and summarize various strategies of the advocacy. I would like to move on to actually the more content-driven.
Sorry, just one.
Sure.
Comment here. It relates to Indonesia, and obviously you do get the role of the parliamentarians and the government. But it reminds me, I was in a meeting and there was KPK was there and people from Tempo, newspaper. Yeah. And the KPK guys were basically saying, look, every single political party would like to get rid of us. None of them like us.
Yeah, that's right.
But the President's office supports us and the people support us.
Yeah.
And the political parties don't dare. They know the people support us. And so they don't dare. And of course, why does the people support them? Well, obviously someone is communicating with the people, which is not the members of parliament, some other mechanism. Maybe it's you and the policy think tanks. Maybe it's, there are other ways. Maybe it's KPK, maybe there are some other forces in there that are in that advocacy mix. But clearly, you've got, it's touching something. Obviously, corruption and the public desire to counter corruption, but something is facilitating that process.
Yeah.
Could I ask also a question? Paul's described the work of Transparency International, PNG. We have your walk against corruption. Do any of the think tanks here of our partners try to go around government and target directly public opinion through walks or through some sort of social media campaign? But you're not directly advocating to the government. You're actually trying to influence public opinion to therefore put pressure on government.
That's a very good question, yeah.
I'm not an advocacy person. That strikes me as potentially very effective, but also a little harder, more expensive, because you're, instead of targeting an audience of one, like you have to find the minister overseeing land use issues. Instead, you need to target an audience of 70 million, trying to influence public opinion. But do any of the think tanks here try to do that? Again, you're trying to move public opinion as a way of pressuring government as opposed to talking directly to government itself.
Yes, we do.
We try to do.
Yeah, we are currently still the Secretariat of PRN, Policy Research Network. The members of the Policy Research Network are think tanks in Jakarta. We have done advocacy through media visit. We come to the editorial board, we bring our research evidences, and we convince them that the issue we bring is very important to be to get attention from the medias, to raise the awareness of policymakers and the publics. but the problems at that time, every think tanks bring their own research, so that become a very various research. But the strength of the model of the advocacy is we collaborate each other, one another, and so we can get attention from the media, because this is beneficial, especially for the less famous think tank. They are beneficial because they can come with the very famous think tank like CSIS, like LPEM, UI, including Paramadina Public Policy Institute.
We will